We finally get to the end of our top 20 2023 Saints list. And remember, it's for this upcoming season, not based on what they've done in the past. We've got our 1 through 6. Everybody's 1 is the same. And then this guy over here, of course, puts me on the spot to give my 1 through 5 list. But we break it all down. It's a really fun show.
I think 2 of the lists were based on the upcoming season. Another one might have been a legacy list. But, hey, Mike's going to Mike. We are presented by PJ's and coming to you from the Better Call BADEAUX podcast studio. So as you are out and about, make sure you stop by at PJ's. They got the best coffee in the whole entire city. So check them out and get your day started with them. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call BADEAUX at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review. And Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey is an 86-proof blend of aged wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Ponchatoula strawberries blended in New Orleans. It is not for the thin-skinned. Look for it in your favorite stores, bars, and restaurants. And check out Ideal Market, home of the freshest produce in the city. They do great things in the community, and they always bring the best quality food products at the best prices. They are the home of the largest variety of Hispanic and international food you will find in the whole entire state. And they have a hot deli that surpasses many restaurants in the flavor of their authentic Hispanic dishes. And make sure you hit up Firehouse Subs, Veteran Boulevard location. Great people doing great stuff for the community. All right, let's get into the show.
We finally made it to the top 1 through 6 of our top 20 list for the 2023 Saints. We've got some similarities, some differences, some questionable top 5, but we're going to get into all of it.
I know everyone you have left. There's nobody questionable.
You don't think?
Left. There's nobody questionable left to be discussed.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead.
It's a hard case for number 2, though, as we said in a previous episode.
Look, Pop Gun here needs to get her shots off. It's fine.
Hey, after the Jameis Winston topic, I don't think we have any that will elicit that emotion. But let's go ahead and start with 6. You guys both have different guys. Nick, go ahead.
Derek Carr.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to be way higher on him.
No, I mean, I think that he belongs in the final show. I mean, you could even make a case that maybe down a couple, but I think his value to the team is so high that you could put him really anywhere after 1, and I wouldn't push back on it. But yeah, I think he's going to be really good for the team. I think he's going to make everybody better. I think he's exactly the player they need. Now, could they have had, a better quarterback? Sure, there's better quarterbacks in the NFL, but he was actually feasible. I was all in on the decision to get him. Yeah. Seeing him at these practices only solidifies that feeling more. So I think he's going to have a good season and elevate this team where it needs to go.
I think with talking with a lot of the players too, just in our limited media interviews in the locker room, because there hasn't been a lot of guys that have stuck around for media, but with the guys we've talked to, I think they would put Derek Carr in their top 6.
Yeah, that's only enhanced. Actually, I go ahead, spoiler alert here now. The first time I wrote my list out, I had him at 4 and I bumped him up to 3, partly after watching him on the practice field and hearing people interview. It's not just, we judge Derek Carr, and a lot of people rank quarterbacks and judge quarterbacks based on production, but it's everything. I mean, nobody can have the intangibles of a quarterback, the leadership, the working with Mike Thomas, working with Chris Olave, working with Rashid Shaheed and Juwan Johnson and the young guys, the being able to run the offense they want to run, the taking the calls away from center Eric McCoy, the getting him into the right place. I mean, Nick couldn't have said it better. I mean, you could argue that he's number 1. I mean, he hasn't proven it here yet. You could definitely argue that he's number 2, but I also don't mind having him number 6 because he hasn't proven anything yet with this team. And he actually has, look, he is coming from a team that wanted to move on from him. So there are things that he has to do to hone it in. We've talked so much about how he had his best years with John Gruden, who runs a similar offense. What did those years look like? 2 years in a row, just 2 years removed from now, 101.4, 100.8 passer rating. 2 years ago, it was 4,804 yards. Red zone has never been big. It's only hit 30 touchdown passes once in his career. But then again, he's been under 10 interceptions 3 different times in his career. So, there's a reason why everybody kind of ranks him as the 12th, 13th, 14th best quarterback in the league, but the position is so important. He's the main reason why you have so much optimism for this team this year, because they found their guy.
Did you have a hard time potentially putting him higher, or was 6 kind of where you had officially landed?
I settled him pretty clearly there. It was just kind of, I went through the list and I put him in, and it just felt like the right spot. And the guys that I put ahead of him are just a little bit more proven. I mean, look, I think Carr could be more important to this team, but relative to some of the stuff that we saw last season with the circumstances of him coming in, like I got to see it before I can push him up a little bit more. So I think he's really just kind of at 6 based on positional value. And then also, look, it's just, it got tough to rank guys, I think, after my number 1. Like it really did. It really did. Like, I feel like in other years where I did this, it got hard to like fill it out at the bottom. I felt like this year it was hard to fill it out at the top, but until we see more, I feel comfortable with him at that spot.
You know what? I think we should circle back actually at the end of the season, once everything is said and done, and redo this list and see how much it's changed and ebbed and flowed. And I think the biggest position group that it's going to be offense, like which running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, are we going to have them in the same sort of spots? I wonder if your number 1s are still going to be there, but we're not going to give you that yet.
But
what the number 1s are.
You make a good point, because the thing with Derek Carr is if he delivers, he doesn't even have to hit his ceiling. If he delivers on his like expected potential or their vision potential for him, there's a really good chance he's number 1. That's what a quarter. I mean, there's a reason he's the one making $33 million, and everyone we're about to talk about is making less than $20 million a year. That's how important quarterback is. So, a lot of these guys have higher ceilings to be really special guys. He just has to be, we've made the like Kirk Cousin for the Vikings comparison a lot of times. That could put him number 1 by the end of the year.
There's only 2 guys on this list that I think could replace my number 1. One of them is my number 2 guy, and my other one's my number 5 guy. But look, like, he makes $33 million, but like, that's not top paid money at his position. There's other guys that are top paid at their position that I think are better at their stuff. So I want to go to number 5.
Well, we got to get Mike's
my number 6.
So you had Derek Carr at 6, and at 6 you have
Chris Olave. This is, we've talked about this a million times on this list. Predictive. There's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he was 1, 2, or 3 on this list by the end of the season. But again, he's only done it for 1 year. One other thing about Chris Olave, I mean, 6 is very high for a guy in his second year to vault this high among the other names. I had him ahead of Ryan Ramczyk, for crying out loud. I have him ahead of Mike Thomas, two guys that Nick doesn't have him ahead of, but Nick has him ahead of Demario Davis. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's done a lot, but 72 career catches, 1,042 yards, 4 touchdowns. One thing that bothered me, he tailed off
15 games too, right?
Yeah, in 15 games. He tailed off a little bit last year. Over his last 5 games, never had more than 65 yards in a game. 1 total touchdown in his last 5 games. He kind of ran out of steam a little bit, I think, toward the end of last season. We know that he wanted to work on getting stronger, catching those contested catches, holding onto the ball all the way to the ground. I think we've already seen a lot of that in OTAs. I have complete faith in him. This is just, you've only shown us 1 year so far, so 6 is pretty high. He's earned it, but I absolutely feel like he's a guy who should be higher on this list by the end of the season.
This is actually pretty interesting to me. So so you guys had Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas at 8. You both have them flipped now at 5. So Nick, you have Michael Thomas at 5, and you have Alvin Kamara at 5. I find that very interesting, but probably right on the money.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is tough, and some people aren't going to agree with it. Either you're going to agree with it or you aren't. I think there's an axis of talent and availability. You do have to be available for the talent, but my problem with this list is that like I said, it got tough to rank people. And I still think Mike Thomas is the most talented player on the team, save for one guy. And I think dropping him to 5 is just kind of where it goes. And I'm going to bet on the health. And I think if he's healthy, you told me there's 10 Mike games. I think there's a chance that he has like 800 yards. I mean, I just think he's that kind of talent. I think with Derek Carr, he's going to be that good. I struggle with it. I don't like it, but I wouldn't like him anywhere else either. I would feel like it was shortchanging his ability. So I just got to have him there. And look, like I said, I think if he has a fully healthy season, I think there's still a chance that he could be the best player on the team.
You know, what's really interesting about this list is I am leaning more, and you're going to see this a lot, especially my number 5, my number 4, my number 2. We know the names I haven't said yet. They are a lot of guys who have incredible skins on the wall, and they're starting to descend a little bit, and they're probably going to descend even more this year. Nick has been a little bit more, hey, if the guy is coming up and this is going to be his year, he's given a little more credit to them. Except Mike Thomas, like that's how special and how good the guy is. Doesn't matter that you haven't seen it in the last 3 years. He shows up on the field, and I don't blame
it. Last year, though. 3 games, but we did actually see it.
Yeah, I mean he's 30 years old. He hasn't had a healthy season in 3 years, but that's how special he is. You could have told me he was. You told me you were surprised at his number 2. You could have told me Michael Thomas was number 2, and I really wouldn't bat an eye. From a talent standpoint, he's probably from a talent ceiling standpoint, yeah.
And there's probably a little bit of insanity on the set right now that like nobody's like, what are you doing? Because he hasn't played in 3 years. Health, it's crazy to keep believing in it, but
he just is that good when he's healthy.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's some of there's only a select few of players that have come through the NFL that when you talk about them, whether the volume of games they've had because of injuries, they're just that good. I mean, can you think of somebody on hand who like had injuries like this that?
No. And look, I think that like I'm usually pretty extremely logical about how I cover the team, but like this, it's Mike Thomas.
Yeah.
Like I don't care.
It's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair.
Like I'm fine being wrong on it if I'm wrong. Like I'd rather be wrong, betting for him than being wrong betting against him.
And I think everybody should go back and watch the previous episode because we did have the reverse Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas conversation, as you said, when they were both at number 8. And I pointed out that even Michael Thomas's stats over his last 9 games when everybody thinks he's in and out of the lineup and he's dealing with injuries, he's still on pace for like 1,100 yards over his last 9 games, so he still produces whenever he gets out there. I would love to see how much he's still producing when healthy. I'd love to see it for him. I'd love to see it for the team. I'd love to see it for getting to cover and watch them. Special players are more fun to watch and more fun to cover.
Derek Carr even mentioned too, a lot of these injuries that he's had to sustain over the last few years is because he's just so violent in his cuts and just because he is such a good player and a lot of other wide receivers can't do what Michael Thomas can do. Sometimes his body just like cannot keep up with what he wants to do and he's putting out. And I agree with Derek Carr on that front, that because he is that good, he's dealing with maybe a more higher volume of injuries than other guys are used to at that position. But he comes back healthy. It's like beating a dead horse. We keep saying. I mean, he is going to be that special guy again, and it's gonna look like 2019 when he's healthy. I don't think there is an area where if Michael Thomas comes back and he's healthy that he's not that player, right?
Well, and you mentioned when Derek Carr talked about him. About what makes him special. One thing that I thought was really interesting, they said, I mean, obviously we know this stuff, but how, Derek Carr's opinion is really interesting because of all the different receivers he's played with, including Devontae Adams. He said, Mike Thomas, like after the catch, we think of him working in traffic. And obviously a lot of people talk about how a lot of his catches are close lines. And he's like, when it's supposed to be 3rd and 5, it's 3rd and 2 because of Michael Thomas. Because he said he's just the way he's attacking every catch. It's like, yeah, maybe he's catching a 5-yard pass, but it's an 8-yard gain because he's so aggressive with it, and that's a quarterback's best friend. If it's 2nd and 2 after he just threw a pass to Michael Thomas,
I think he's going to age extremely well too because his game isn't predicated on getting like extreme amounts of separation or burning by people. Like as he ages and Mike loses a step, like he'll still be able to make contested catches because he just knows how to use his body and all that stuff. My other favorite thing about that Carr thing, it's just funny. Everybody that watches Mike Thomas play, they describe him as a violent player. And I've been describing him as a violent player for, and everybody that comes through is just there's just some term of like, it's just like the harshest word you can find to describe his game. We were watching practice yesterday and Doug Tatum says he snatches the ball. Like it's just never, everything about Mike is just violent. Like that's just his game.
All right, let's go ahead and move.
Well, it's still me on number 5, right?
Alvin? On 5. Yes, yeah. Alvin.
Okay.
Let's not forget
Alvin's
that.
not going to age well. So for that case, your Michael Thomas argument wins over my Alvin Kamara argument. It's not going to look pretty 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Will it still look pretty this year? Remains to be seen. But the one reason I felt comfortable keeping Alvin at number 5 on my list is halfway through last season, which was a disappointing season for Alvin Kamara. No doubt about it. The last 2 years have been disappointing. But we had a podcast episode halfway through last year, and I named him my team MVP for the season halfway through. Now, that was right after the Rams game where he had 3 touchdowns. He finished with 4 total touchdowns all season. But that's still how he impacts the game. Last year was a disappointing year for him, and he averaged 92.5 yards a game, the lowest of his career. That's the worst we've ever seen Alvin. Usually he's averaging, like clockwork, over 100 yards a game. I think they can get more out of him. I don't think he's going to turn back the clock and look like the guy who was catching 83 passes a year. The guy who was averaging 4.6, 4.7, 5.0 as his rookie year, 6.1 yards per carry. I don't see that, but I also don't think we're going to just see him average 3.7 yards a carry for the rest of his career. I think a lot of this, we had a big Pete Carmichael discussion when we talked about Taysom Hill. A lot of this is on Pete. Nick made a really good point. He's been less effective outside than inside, but that doesn't mean that's Pete's job. That's the offensive line's job. That's drawing up this offense and making this a better offense. That's Derek Carr maybe knowing how to throw the ball to Alvin better than Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston were getting the ball to Alvin. I know there is still a special player in here who can be the best player on their offense still. I think this is maybe the last time I'm confident that he'll be number 5 as opposed to somebody like we just said with Chris Olave, but I'm still comfortable keeping him here. I predict the drop-off coming. I don't think we've seen the bottom fall out just yet.
I had my two arguments about, and I'm pro Alvin. Like, I don't want to come off as like anti-Alvin here, but my two things that factored into me ranking him lower: A, suspension. There's almost a certainty that he's going to miss X amount of games. And 2 is the guys they added at running back. Like, he's not going to get the same volume. Like, you don't draft Kendre Miller in the 3rd round not to give him touches. You don't sign Jamal Williams, the NFL's leader in touchdowns, to not give him touches. So I think opportunity is going to fall in 2 different ways. And I just think that, maybe the numbers drop a little bit. Maybe that 92 is the last time he gets over 90.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Predictive. I'm predicting a drop-off for Alvin. And also this, to say not a knock against Alvin, that would be true of any 7th-year running back in the league.
Absolutely.
I mean, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, he's already dealt with all those injuries. He came back strong when he found the right team with San Francisco.
He's kind of Ingram-ish,
that is true of 30-year-old running backs who are in their 7th year of the league, especially with the mileage they put on him the last 2 years. So there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and just what are the play calls going to look like from Pete Carmichael? Is it Alvin Kamara friendly or is it not?
Yeah.
That's going to get into it. All right, now we can move on to 4. You guys both have defensive players. I'll have you go first, Nick.
I got Cam Jordan here. And it's funny, I had him ranked lower last year, I think, when we did this, like maybe 11th even. And I think he had a pretty solid season. I think he can be better, though, like sack-wise, going forward a little bit. Just getting Brian Brzee, I think, is going to help. Kalen Saunders is probably going to help. Nathan Shepard, if he's any good, he should probably help. I think getting just that interior push is going to benefit him a little bit. I do think that there's probably, like, Cam's probably not the same player he used to be, and there is probably some legacy ranking here. There's probably other players on this list that could ascend above him, but until we see it, I think he's just got to be somewhere in that top 5, and I think there's still a lot of productivity left in him, and getting him a little bit of help, I think could go a long way.
Well, you don't have to make that argument to me. I've been the until we see it guy on this list. It's the slight difference in our rankings. To me, Cam Jordan is going to come up a couple spots higher for me. I just had Alvin 5, and I still have Demario Davis 4. I'm in until we see it mode with these guys. I do predict the drop-off is coming, but I just don't think the other people have surpassed them yet, even though it could definitely happen this year. Demario Davis, what is he? 109 tackles last year, 105 the year before, 119 the year before, 111 the year before, 110 the year before, 135 the year before. One thing I really liked about Demario Davis, his coverage skills are declining a little bit as he gets a little slower, but he filled in an area where they really needed him last year with 6.5 sacks, which was by far the most he's had with the Saints. He's had interceptions in the past when he was really good in coverage. His QB hits every year, 8, 10, 12, 9, 11, 15. Tackles for loss, 10 or more every year. He just does a lot, and that doesn't even speak to leading the huddle, being the leader in the locker room, being the inspirational leader, being the guy young guys look to. We said the cold, hard reality. We talked about him in the last episode. We thought if they re-signed Caden Ellis, they might want to get out ahead of it and try to trade him while he still had some value. But you know who I think would line up to put Demario Davis on their team? Every team trying to win a championship this year. He doesn't have a lot left, but if this team's doing something special, he's going to be sitting there at the podium talking about being the vocal leader of the defense this year. He's still there for now, even though, there's a shelf life on him, I'm sure.
And with Cam Jordan, I think if it were just up to his energy, he would never have a drop off. He is like a childlike energy where it just never seems to run out. And I think that is a part of too, like his motor on the football field is he talks about the way he plays football too, like playing a kid's game. And like, this is just, his life, and he grew up watching his dad, and this is just what he's wanted to do. And I think when you're like mind, body, soul football, and that has to play a part in why Cam Jordan is still able to compete at the level that he does. We're getting to the top 3. I can't believe we've made it.
I already said mine, Derek Carr. So
I know.
So we are really getting down to it.
All right, so I'm up.
Yeah.
I got Chris Olave here, and look, I know you have him lower, but an 1,100-yard receiver in 15 games as a rookie. You go back through his tape and you look at some of the missed opportunities. Like, he could have very easily been like 1,600 yards in 15 games last year. If he completes some of those plays, I think you're looking at someone that's a top tier wide receiver. And I don't think it's going to be that hard for him to get there. And then you add in better quarterback play, someone that throws with more anticipation than Andy Dalton, someone that's more consistent down the field than Andy Dalton. I think all those things bode really well for him. I think he's going to have a monster season. I think he's going to be a potential, look, it's a stacked position, but I think at the end of the season, we're going to be having conversations about, like, is Chris Olave Pro Bowl caliber? Like, I think he's going to be that good. And if you keep Mike on the field and you pull a little coverage off him and teams aren't keying on a rookie in his first season in the NFL, I think things are going to open up for him, and I think he's going to be great.
I think there's no question as far as projecting the 2023 season. If you like sit me down and you say, why are you confident in the Saints? Derek Carr, our number one guy, and Chris Olave are probably the 3 reasons that give me the most optimism, because Mike is a little bit of a question mark. The other guys that we're talking about, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Alvin Kamara, we don't think they're going to have better years than they've had in the past. Hopefully they can still be close to what they've been in the past. But the rise and ascendance of Chris Olave is one of the main reasons why we all think this team's going to win the division this year. He's on a short list of reasons for optimism.
Can Chris Olave be kind of like, can he get to that Justin Jefferson type level that early?
That's lofty. That's lofty.
But not Justin Jefferson, but top tier, like Stephon Diggs level. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think he has that kind of talent. I think there's no question about it. We saw it last year. It's just he has to get stronger. He has to complete some of these catches. He can't fumble when he hits the ground. Like, we could very easily go through and find 5 plays that, okay, if he catches this ball and he should have caught it and he's just a little bit stronger, you're adding 400 yards to that total. Like, no problem at all. There were, like, literally those plays, like the Tampa game where they were going down the field to him. If he catches a couple of those, it's game over. Like, he's rookie of the year. There's no question about it. So I do think he can get to that level. We see it. His route running is unbelievable. Yeah. Like, he came in doing stuff that, like, you just don't see people doing in their rookie season. He's so smart. His feel for the game is crazy. He knows how to set stuff up. He knows how to play against coverage. He's just unbelievably polished. Just give him a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of strength, a little more confidence, knowing what it takes to get through a season. I think he can be top tier.
It's funny, when we were talking about Michael Thomas in the last episode, Nick talked about how many contested catches he had and where Chris Olave ranked. You can tell me the number again, but I think half of the reason why Chris Olave didn't have more contested catches is because I've never seen anybody with such an uncanny ability to create space in a phone booth. Like, they could throw it. He will find a way to carve out this area where it's not a contested catch because he's found that little pocket. He's really good at that.
He leads the Saints, like, for me watching film, like, going, oh my God. Like, because there's just things he does. Like, the separation, it's just the way, like, he'll plant and go, and it's just like, oh my God. Like, he has the most oh my God moments of anybody on the team.
Well, and that was one of the things on the draft board. The first thing starred by Chris Olave's name was his route running and just how crisp he was in games at Ohio State. Obviously, Saints love drafting Ohio State players, and it's worked out for them. Another thing with Chris Olave too is his ability to not only kind of find space in that phone booth, but remember, what was the game where he went up? Like, he's not afraid to go up and, like, kind of and make dangerous plays, and that's where he had the one concussion.
Yeah, and he caught the ball on like the hardest play of the year. Yeah, unbelievable.
He held on to it.
Yeah,
I know, it's crazy.
And then other times he didn't. It's just consistency, and it's something he knows and he worked the whole offseason to address. Like, it was a point of focus for him. And we've seen some of it. Got to see a whole lot more. Right. But even if he gets 30% better at that, I mean, it's significant yardage added to his total.
Well, he already proved that he is going to be better at that, because the one thing he said was putting on weight. That was the very last thing he told us when it was locker clean out, is I got to put on weight. I know what I need to do. Like, almost like just over and over repetitive, that he almost was like frustrated with himself that he didn't put on the weight in year one, which, as you both know, I mean, when wide receivers come in and they have to just learn that playbook, it's kind of hard to work around that. and do all the other things right as well. So in year 2, we see him. He has put on the size. It looks like he has put on muscle weight. So it's going to be really interesting to see him in the mandatory mini camp and the one-on-ones to test that strength and see if he can go up against Marshawn Lattimore.
I can't wait to see
it.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got our 3. Because you had Derek Carr at 3.
Yep.
And so do we want to move on to 2?
Yeah, I talked enough about Derek Carr when we talked about Carr, but I did save Cam Jordan, who's my number 2 when Nick talked to him a little bit ago. I agree, number 2 was really hard. I mean, I'm fine with going younger. Chris Olave, I'm fine with going, what was your highest ceiling of your career? I'm fine with going, what's your highest ceiling if you're healthy this year? But Cam Jordan has the combination of he's done it for a decade, and I think he still did it last year. I mentioned last year's shows. We had to name a final season MVP for last year, and I gave it to Cam Jordan. He was still doing it. I do think that drop-off is going to come. I think we've seen signs of it for stretches over the last couple of years that it's going to come. But then he still finds a way to bounce back. Last year, his 2 best games were 2 of the most important wins of the season. He had 2 sacks, and that got to have it win against Seattle after they came back from the long, disappointing trip to London. He had 3 sacks and a forced fumble at Philadelphia late in the season. Here's the number that stood out to me when I pulled open Cam's page, which is just full of numbers. 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16. Every year, 16 exactly. Now, there's been 2 17-game seasons. He's missed 2 games, one because of COVID and one because he got gouged in the eye. But talk about a guy who shows up for OTAs, who shows up for, he takes the fewest of those veteran day off practices in the year. And boy, oh boy, they need him to we talked about Alvin Kamara, how they brought in Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller, and they're going to take snaps away from him. No one's taking away Cam's snaps this year. He better play. He better put another 16 on the board this year.
And the one that I had starred for Nick's list, I think he deserves to be in the top 5. It's glaring to see him at 2, but when you look at the Saints as a whole, it is hard to fill that number 2 spot, and Nick does have Ryan Ramczyk at 2. Why do you have him so high?
Why do you have him starred?
Because I don't think I would have put him at 2.
Where would you put him?
I would have probably put him at 5 or 6.
Okay. Where'd you have him?
I had him pretty low. Did I have him 9?
You had Ryan Ramczyk at 9.
Yeah.
I still think he's probably the second most talented player on the team until Olave and Mike kind of show us and Derek Carr shows what they can do. Look, he gave up 3 sacks last year. Like 3 out of a whole entire season. That's a really low number. You go back and look at those sacks and you look at the consistency of the drops. Their quarterbacks were dropping way too far through the whole entire season. Like, it isn't just blocking the halo. Like, you're blocking the halo and then beyond because your quarterback's getting too deep. So now your tackles have to block at a wider depth. I think when you get more consistency at that position, we're going to see Ramczyk shift back more toward what we're used to seeing him at. Has he lost a step in some regards? Is he the same player in the running game in that? No, he's not. And I think there's times where you can look at him and you can see that he's visibly just not moving the same as he used to. But I still think that if we were going to rank the players who have the chance of making an all-pro team this year, I think Ramczyk has probably the shortest odds this side of surprise number 1 on both lists, Marshawn Lattimore. I think Ramczyk, even then, if you're talking about availability, Marshawn's availability, injuries over the last couple of years, he might have the best odds at actually doing that. So, like, I get it, but if you actually look at his play last year, like I made the comment the last time, like he feels like the oldest 2017 draft pick. And I think that's true. But I also think that there's circumstances within how he played his position where if you're just like pulling up numbers, it's like, oh, wow, Ramczyk gave up 3 sacks and 20 pressures last year. That's not what we're used to seeing. But then you look at it and it's like, oh, man, like the blocking difficulty and the inconsistencies with how the quarterbacks played last year played a big part in that.
It's been a lot of wear and tear on Ryan Ramczyk with the injuries. And I think that probably plays into why we've seen him fall off. Have we seen him 100% healthy for an entire season?
And I think that clouded my judgment of this list. Well, here, first of all, a little insight into Nick Underhill. He's trying to like win this list. I texted him and I said, there's no such thing as stats for offensive linemen. And I said, hey, what numbers do you have for pressures for Ryan Ramczyk the last couple of years? And he didn't even reply to me because he didn't want to arm me with any information. He wanted to have the surprise Ryan Ramczyk drop. I know that's what happened.
That's not what happened.
But look, I'm glad to hear you say it because look, unfortunately I have to, unless you were really studying the film intently, which Nick does every week, which is a big reason why I think people love NewOrleans.Football. He does it better than anyone I've ever been around. It's hard not to put the failings of the offensive line on Ryan Ramczyk a little bit. Missed a lot of time 2 years ago. Last year played, but boy, we never see him out there Wednesday at practice. And a lot of times we didn't see him out there Thursday at practice too. There's no way he was playing at full capacity.
Well,
so
that's
if he
not gonna
still looked
change.
good if he still looked that good to you on film, knowing that's really promising, because you're right, that's not going to change. So I kind of feel like how you feel about Alvin, which is I don't see it getting better, but I don't see it getting worse necessarily either. Hopefully he learns how to manage it and still produce while
it's going to get worse. What's going on with from what I've heard about his knee, it's degenerative. It's not going to get better. It's not going to get level. It's something that's going to have to be managed throughout his career. But again, I don't think the perceived issues with him, I don't think it was the knee. I think it's the inconsistencies about here's how I've blocked this play my whole career, and now all of a sudden the quarterback in week 15 is taking a deeper drop than I'm used to him taking.
Yeah.
And when you're blocking, we've heard him talk, like Teron Armstead talked about it all the time. He blocked to a spot. Like he never knew where Drew was. He just knew he blocked to a spot because Drew was going to be in the same place every single time. And that made it so Teron's not giving up any sacks. Now, if you're blocking to a spot and your landmarks aren't the quarterback's landmarks, it doesn't work.
You're not on the same page. And with Derek Carr, we'll be on the same page.
Presumably.
Presumably.
From what I'm hearing from Eric McCoy in the locker room, it seems like that confidence is already there with the offensive line. But who is the starting five is the biggest question too.
Well, look, this is probably a good time for our ideal market segment. But, I'm wondering as we're going through this list, what if I told you could get 15, 16 games out of Ryan Ramczyk, out of Michael Thomas, out of Trevor Penning, who makes the biggest difference if I tell you, you know what, I'm giving you a fully healthy season? Who would you take that from out of anyone on this list? You get a fully healthy season.
Well, what's the floor?
They're starting all 17 games. We know what their body. We know they're all fighting through something.
And Michael Thomas is on that list.
Anyone on the team. I mean, Derek Carr is probably number one. But
I mean,
I figured he was like the
the floor on Ramczyk feels higher than the floor on Mike. Like Mike could be like one game and then you don't see it again. So, like if you're telling me like a Ramczyk injury plagued season, but he still plays the majority of the games, it's Mike.
It's tough. It's tough. I just made the question up on the spot.
0 or 17 on either one. Like I almost have to go Ramczyk because I feel so terrified of their offensive line. Like their offensive line just scares me to death.
I'm kind of backing up your ranking on him by saying that. I think we'd all probably pick Michael Thomas, but that shows how important Ryan Ramczyk is.
No, I'm taking Ramczyk on that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, think about what we were saying just 2 years ago in 2019. We were arguably saying the Saints had the best tackle duo in the NFL with Ramczyk and Teron Armstead.
There was no arguably,
Well, there was a little bit. We constantly saw like PFF putting up. I can't remember who they were competing with. Can't remember what team it was, but Teron Armstead
the Eagles
and Ryan
maybe
Ramczyk.
with Lane Johnson.
Look, I would have bet like everything I'm worth after 18 that Ramczyk would have been a Hall of Fame player because he was like on a trajectory. Like players on the offensive line don't get all pro recognition early in their career. It's usually like 2 years after they're killing it, and everyone's like he was recognized in real time for how good he was. And when that happens, like you're going to be an all-decade player, and then it just kind of went a little bit sideways for him, with the injuries and just the quarterback changes and all that stuff. But I still think that it's in there. Like I think he can be better than he was, and it's the same argument I said for McCoy. Like I just think that solid, steady quarterback play is going to make a world of difference for the offensive line.
It's a good point. How scary it is if Ryan Ramczyk is not on the field. Like when you just put it that way of. When you take him off the field, I mean, and that's why he is a top 6 player, I think.
Yeah. I won't die on the hill for 2. Like if someone, if you're saying it's great, like it's fine. Like I could see him being lower, but he definitely is one of the top tier players.
I think it's crazy. I think it just surprised me that he was that high, but
we'll
see.
I will readily admit I'm too low on him, but unfortunately, I just feel like we've seen him in decline, and it's kind of the way. It's a similar conversation to Alvin. I think that you worry about. Will we not see it again?
Right.
It can cloud judgment without question.
Let's get to number 1. You mentioned it. It's Marshawn Lattimore. Just how special of a cornerback he is, and after the recent Hall of Fame induction, remind me again.
Jabari Greer.
when we were taught, when I was asking you both about it, it goes Marshawn Lattimore, Jabari Greer. That's how good Marshawn Lattimore is. All time, he is the best Saints cornerback in their history. You both agreed with that.
No question. Yeah. I mean, there might be someone in the 60s or whatever like that.
Dave Waymer.
Yeah, but I got to go, based on what I've seen, I got to go Marshawn. Singular greatest talent on the team. There's really nothing else. I think he's just, there's Marshawn and then there's the rest of the list.
Yeah.
That's where I started. I put in 1 and I put in 20 and then everything else in between there was hard. 1 was easy. 20 was easy because I wanted to bet on someone's potential. But Marshawn, far and away, just he's a game changer. He's the best player on the team.
And as if we needed one more thing to prove that, he left the team for 9 games last year, and you realized how much he was needed even more. And here's the funny thing about Marshawn Lattimore. So he leaves with an injury that hopefully is just, he's going to put it away in the past and never have to worry about it again. It was a terrible injury, lacerated kidney. It took him a long time to come back from that. But guess what we didn't see when Marshawn Lattimore came back? Any sense of drop-off whatsoever. He comes back in Philadelphia, has 2 interceptions in the game, or he has the pick 6 in the game on the play that he saw twice. They threw it at him once. He was mad that he gave up like a 7-yard slant. And when they tried to throw it again, he pick 6'd him. He holds A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith to a combined 4 catches for 33 yards. And it's just like, that was the guy who was gone for 3 months. That's what he looks like now. I mean, past breakups, past defenses, 13 a year over his whole career. I mean, it's just when he's your number 1 corner, the entire secondary looks so much better. And this secondary looks really good because he's going to be the number 1 corner. I mean, he's still young too. All these, everybody comes with a qualifier. Boy, they've been at the top of their game. They've been all pros, but they're getting older. But he's young, he's healthy, he's great at what he does. Other ways we could do this list. All right, Derek Carr, quarterback's really important, but he's the 13th or 14th best quarterback in the league. Here's a guy who is probably one of the top 3 at his position in the league. Is that fair to say? I mean, this is an easy ranking.
I want to hear your top 5.
I didn't have a top 5.
You've heard our arguments.
Yes.
You've heard our arguments.
No, of course, Marshawn. And I do want to say this too before we get off the topic. I guess I'll start with Marshawn Lattimore, just how special he is. There's few players where it's like, all right, grab your popcorn on Sunday because he's the number 1 quarterback. Usually when he goes up against the number 1 wide receiver, yes, there's tiffs between Mike Evans, but the reason why we started watching that is because it was best on best, and you rarely get that on Sundays in the NFL because of injuries and the nature of the game and different matchups. But I think I would like to see the viewership when it's Bucs Saints games for people that are just tuning in. I mean, true football fans that just want to see, all right, like if they, you know what, they should do a simulcast where the camera is only on Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans when the Bucs and Saints play. How much, I think it would make, I mean, in gold.
People are aware of that matchup too.
Yeah.
Like I do a lot of fantasy football work and listen to a lot of fantasy football. Like every podcast I listen to, whether it's ESPN, CBS, Action Network, like everyone is well aware. Well, you can't play Mike Evans this week. Like, like they know.
Who was the dude that played for Houston? Cortland Finnegan and their receiver.
Was it Brandon Marshall? No,
Andre Johnson.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
yeah, it's like
I think I might have been at that game.
where they got in the fight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so fun fact, growing up in north of Houston in Humble, Texas, silent on the H, knew you were coming with it. My parents had season tickets to Texans games. They are the biggest sports fans for people who aren't involved. Houston Texans. But they grew up in Philly and always had to be at the Allen Iverson games, the Flyers games, the Eagles games. Like both my parents can give you solid history on sports, and neither of them are really in like the sporting game or were at that time. My dad's in golf now, but long story short, we get season tickets to the Texans when we moved to Houston because they wanted to be around sports, and that sticks out. That and the other was it the guy whose nose busted up. Do you remember that play? The Texans game. You guys can answer this in the comments.
I didn't watch a lot of Texans football.
Was it Brian?
J.J. Watt? Brian Cushing?
No, Brian Cushing. Brian Cushing is the one. and he had like the bloody face. There's just few things, and that's one of the top 5. You just remember
but it's on that level. I think it's like it's just one of those known ririvalries that like ranks and everybody knows about it and they want to see it. There's been multiple
helmet flies off, punching with the helmet on.
You just need to add a knock against Marshawn Lattimore. Tom Brady knows how to make him not an X factor in the game. They orchestrated that to get him removed from that game, and they beat the Saints because he was like, "If we all go after him, we're going to get the double ejection. We're going to get the double ejection, and if Mike Evans and Marshawn both leave the field, I will win the game."
Well, so wasn't it that Leonard Fournette was chirping, and then it was Mike Evans, and then
Tom Brady got in there, and you could tell he was throwing the stick in the needle
shot at Marshawn? Was it Leonard or Mike?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Man, I played that video over and over and over. Somebody gave
it was Mike Evans again. He got ejected for the whole next week, didn't he? Again, twice.
That is the one downside on it. Like Seattle got under his skin too. Like it's the one downside on him. All right, who's your number 2?
Oh, my number 2, and this might be it's different from you guys. I'm going based on like truly, if you look at the Saints roster and you have one or the other one's not on the field. I was flipping between Cam Jordan and Derek Carr. I have to go Derek Carr at 2.
Okay, it's
the most important position on the field, quarterback. So I've got Marshawn Lattimore.
So you
Derek Carr.
no faith in 15. Player ranked 15. So if Derek leaves, so is Jameis actually on your top 20? Now that you're actually doing this,
she agreed with me. She said quarterbacks are important.
Then if they're,
I mean, if you're backstopping, if your qualification is he's on the field or not, but if you have the backup quarterback at 15, should the starter be at 2? That's the question I'm asking. So is Jameis actually on your list, or is Derek actually your number 2? Or is it both?
Both can be true. Both can be true, Nick.
Both.
I don't think they can.
Let it go.
I think it can be both.
All right.
Yeah. So I have Marshawn Lattimore, Derek Carr. I'll go Cam Jordan at 3 for all the reasons we said. Consistency. We haven't seen the fall off yet. It potentially could. I mean, like we're going based off potential at this point. The fall off eventually coming with Father Time. I'm gonna go Mike Thomas ahead of Chris Olave.
Okay.
So that would be at I don't have
4.
I don't have it written, so I'm just like basing off the list.
You're number 4.
Was Mike Thomas at 4?
And then Olave at 5?
Yeah.
That's your top 5? Solid top 5.
Mm-hmm.
I feel better about her top 5 than my own top 5.
But this is after us talking it through. You guys
I thought she was
going to
put DeMario in her top 5. I thought she was the biggest DeMario supporter of the 3.
I am, but I'm realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think DeMario, not saying yours is not realistic.
No, I gotcha. They're on a jumble together. They're on a jumble together.
Yeah, and it is hard to pick even 20 on this team.
It's a strange roster build too.
Yes,
Marshawn's the only one who's in the center of his prime right now of their top 10 players.
There's new guys and there's guys that are at toward the back half, and we're kind of assuming they're going to fall off, or we've kind of seen the fall off, and they're young guys who have the potential to hit their ceilings. There's a lot of what ifs if you guys haven't figured that out yet. There's a ton of what ifs on our top 20, which makes this season, I think, the most exciting so far, outside of just a new quarterback. I think this is probably the most anticipated season since before Drew got here.
They need
I do. I think I'd like to get everybody else's. Feel free to drop it in the comment. When was the most anticipated season in the last 15 years?
I thought it was last season.
Did you?
It wasn't.
I think there's more anticipation.
I think
so too. No, I think so too. Last year though, coming into it, like after they added Tyron and Jarvis, like it just felt like it was like at a fever pitch. Jameis had social media on fire, like all his videos, like it just felt like, and then it wasn't.
And then it wasn't.
I would, since we've brought up this extra category, I'd say 2018 only because the way that 2017 season ended, I think everybody felt like, oh, this might be the best team in the NFL. So everybody was ready to watch that 2018 season.
And we are going to have a Saints mailbag soon show. So start adding those to the YouTube comment sections. Give us your top 20, your top 5. What you agree. I know not everybody's going to agree with us. That's for sure. We are going to hear from the Saints faithful, and we appreciate you guys watching. If you like what we've been doing, please like, subscribe, share. If you listen to just our shows on podcasts, those are available for you guys too. Be sure to like and subscribe there, and we'll see you next time.